FromSoftware's games have utilized a very specific kind of storytelling. The kind that favors those willing to pore over item descriptions and forensically analyze the various environments. But, out of all the questions I have to ask, one has been burning in my mind. So what are the FromSoftware bosses actually doing in their boss chambers? Why do they fight you time and time again? Now, Elden Ring has a staggering number of what we can qualify as boss encounters. I'll just be focusing on the Elden Ring bosses that provide trophies. I didn't play through Sekiro or Bloodborne, and I don't think I could work out what's going on just by looking at the wiki. And everyone in Armored Core fits into a single category that I will reveal very soon. Mostly, I'm not gonna check. To keep things interesting, the order of our categories is from smallest to largest. The three largest aren't that interesting. Stay tuned to find out. Our first category of boss activity is, you have something they want. These are bosses that you encounter, and the reason they fight you is to violently extract something out of your person. First up is the Four Kings. These cool cats seem to just kind of exist in the abyss until a walking sack of humanity drops in. This is supported by their mechanics. One of their attacks saps the humanity out of you. Next up is another Abyss Boy, Manus, or rather, the Abyss Boy. It's his hand that reaches out from beyond time and space to pull you into the past, and then later on, into his boss chamber. He's looking for his broken amulet, and I mean, yeah, me too. I played through the entirety of Prepare to Die, except for the part where you find the amulet and go to the DLC. I am likely not alone in this. Last in this category is the Pursuer. He wants your life. Arguably, he's doing his job, but for eternity, imagine doing a job for eternity. He likes it. Our next category is hiding. These bosses are doing what they can to lay low and fight you because that's the same way you would react to being perceived. Gwendolyn is first up. He's the son of final boss of Dark Souls, Gwyn. Gwendolyn loves his home Anor Londo so much that he keeps up an illusion of the sun shining on it. And once you dispel the illusion through one of a pair of methods, the sun never shines again on Anor Londo. And I mean, he was probably happy here. He seemed to have a family that cared about him. Imagine if Gwyn didn't clock how his child is gender non-conforming and named him Gwyn the Third, and then he'd have to become Gwyn the Second after Gwyn's firstborn got too drunk at a family gathering and told his father what he really thinks of dragons, and Gwyn really hated that. Godric is up next, and this is a pretty spiteful summation. Everyone talks about how he's doing all this grafting, and yeah, that's pretty messed up. Does he have any goals aside from get swole, though? He really thinks he's gonna get as strong as his great-great-grandfather? He's just sore because his great-cousin twice removed slapped him silly after he was ableist towards her and her little brother. He's not thinking of showing up for a rematch, right? He's just gonna stay in his collapsing graveyard, clutching his great rune, doing a bunch of stuff that's gonna scare the hoes while his great-grandfather moves in the basement. Mohg, the Omen, is being put here on a technicality. This is a projection of Mohg, much in the same way that his brother has a projection of himself, which we will get to. I am assuming that Mohg put this projection here to keep his jailers from thinking he escaped, which is wild. Imagine breaking out of prison and leaving behind a copy of yourself that shanks anyone that gets too close to it. Kinda weird how he appears at the entryway to the hole, though. I'm sorry, I can't say That's exactly what happened, though. The merchants were rounded up. Yeah, it is terrible. That's why I'm using the term hole. Sure, there's a tonal dissonance between the casual manner I talk about the subject and the subject itself. That's where the humor comes from. You know, laughter is the lube that makes getting by life a little easier. Our next category are bosses that are hanging around a location in mourning and are fighting you because they are displaying antisocial behavior. Hurt people, and we have to keep that in mind while you loot the body of Ceaseless Discharge's dead sister right in front of him. Sure, his sister actually faked her death, and that's not really her corpse, but he doesn't know that. Poor guy. Yorm the Giant sits alone on his throne, refusing the call to save the world. Yorm was literally called Yorm the Lonely by his people. They didn't trust him. He's a giant, and giants haven't really had a good relationship with people historically in any of the Souls games. But the people liked that he was big and strong and could keep them safe. So Yorm subjected himself to a life of service for a population of people who only welcome him for what he can do and not for who he is. Unfortunately for Yorm, everyone in the Souls games is subjected to an eternal cycle of growth and decay that eventually causes everything to fall into entropy, and I have a giant slaying sword. The old Demon King is found by the player in a boss arena constructed out of the bodies of his kind. The only way out being a boiling lake, where a giant worm is breathing lightning, and the only siege weapon still operating in this godforsaken kingdom is levied at anything that moves. He's waiting to die, but he will also kill anything that looks like the people who have subjected his people to a millennia of torment. King behavior. No notes. Renala spends her time hanging out in a library with what is next in a line of cautionary tales about the cost of eternal rebirth in a FromSoftware game. The faculty at the academy apparently locked her up here after her ex-husband Radagon left her for America. She does not actually fight us in her own boss fight. Her second phase is completely hijacked by her daughter, who does not comment about it ever. Renala just really hasn't been the same since her husband left. At least she got to keep the dog in the divorce. And speaking of dogs, Sif the Great Wolf is here too! Sif could arguably go into other categories, but I'm putting Sif here for two reasons. One is that the arena you fight in is the gravesite of Sif's companion Artorias, and two, because you literally cannot fight the Four Kings without defeating Sif in combat. We're all mourning here. Our next category is my favorite. These bosses have no clear reason why they are there, so I've taken what I know and have constructed reasons why. The Capper Demon, for example, is just taking their dogs out for a walk in Undeadburg. This is the only park, and the dogs are really gentle once you get to know them. The Stray Demon is just stuck pacing in a room. Poor guy must be experiencing an industrial amount of FOMO. Old Dragon Slayer is just standing menacingly in the Cathedral of Blue. Dark Lurker. Dark Lurker! This boss vexes me. Nobody talks about it because there's nothing to say. Ilana is amassing souls to enact her vengeance, which is kind of vague, and I mean we can all relate, right? Don't worry, Ilana. Soon you'll accept that the best revenge is to live a good life. And if you don't, I'll turn you into an axe. The Crystal Sage you meet hanging out with the Undead Legion apparently left the archives to teach magic. Getting real Walter White energy out of this guy. Something about someone who used to be in a prestigious partnership now teaching in an environment that isn't glamorous. Idealizing the work you were doing instructing the next generation, but then you find Wolnir by touching a cup. He is just locked into a stalemate, able to avoid complete submersion into the abyss by virtue of his magic bracelets, but never being able to actually pull himself out of it. I don't know what his plan is, but it sounds like he made his bed. Astel, in any of its incarnations, is just there. We have reason to believe it stole a sky? Due to its alien nature, I believe its motives are unfathomable. Bringing it back to Artorias, first in the category of fighting endlessly is the Abyss Walker himself. You actually walk into his boss room as he is running his sword through, dude. Depending on how things go, you're next. Scorpioness Najka is currently involved in a protracted domestic violence case. Her relationship with her husband is not so much toxic as it is venomous. Her madness does stem from the fact that she is a half-scorpion monster. I have no reason to argue that her husband would not have eventually followed suit if we did not murder him for the ring on his hand. Next up is the Giant Lord, who we meet not in the real world of Dark Souls 2, but in a memory of a lore long since past. He's stuck in a 5-minute time loop, which I guess isn't as bad as what the Abyss Watchers are going through. These guys keep getting reanimated and they keep killing each other because they're all infected with the Abyss. It's even a feature of the first phase. These guys want to be Employee of the Month so bad. The Burnt Ivory King has spent so much time fighting endlessly that he changed his name. Or other people did. Anyway, you show up and actually close the portals to hell, and you still have to kill him for his crown. You'd think that after freeing him from endless combat, he'd be grateful. Don't bother trying to defend him to me. ACAB. Next, we have Elimer, who spends his time staring at a painting of Malenia. After he was sentenced to death, he used his mind powers to get the upper hand and ousted the lord of the castle to a nearby dry patch. I'm putting him here because I'm assuming he just kills everybody that shows up at this point. He was really into the whole murder thing in the first place, which is why he was sentenced to death. It's just another day for this guy, really. Fortisax is described in the lore as fighting endlessly against the death that has overtaken Godwin. I'm not sure how you could achieve that, or even how you could measure how successful Fortisax is at this task. This is, however, the only evidence I need to put him here. Sir Alon is looking for an honorable end through combat, which is fair, but really annoying. And Gale is killing everyone he meets in pursuit of some paint, also fair, and really annoying. All of the bosses in this category share a trait significant enough to comment on it. These bosses are not actually in the chamber you fight them in, at least the first time you meet them. Our first qualifier is the Asylum Demon. This guy actually waits above the room you fight him in, and keen-eyed players will actually see him standing on the roof. Don't worry, you can get the drop on him right back. Quelaag enters the boss room from where she likes to hang out with her sister. Seath stops turning kidnapped maidens into monsters for 2 seconds to come barreling into the boss arena. Taurus Demon jumps onto the bridge you fight him at. These may feel out of order for some of you. The cards got shuffled over the course of production. The Gaping Dragon is actually just hanging out in a giant drain, and it crawls up to take a break from passively siphoning food like a whale and attacks you like a nightmare Roompa. The vestigial head is very cute, don't you think? Nishandra can enter the arena after a prior boss fight, but I'd be remiss not to mention she can be waiting in the chamber for you if you're an overachiever. And then Aldia will follow her. I haven't actually completed Dark Souls 2, so it's really funny to imagine the boss fights getting progressively worse as you go from my 14-year-old OC to this pile of flaming dirt. The old Iron King emerges from a pool of lava. Do you think he has to come up for air? Like, did we come in while he was doing some recreational swimming? Anyway, the Dancer and Vort enter their boss arenas through spooky portals. The Demon Prince just kind of happens after the Demon in Pain and Demon from Below are defeated. Becoming royalty as a demon is apparently not determined through bloodline, and is more like a Digimon situation. Stray Mimic Tear hides somewhere off-screen and is teleported in through night magic or something. And Margit, the aforementioned projection of Morgoth, kinda teleports in, and superhero lands, like the bootlicking nerd he is. Our next category includes anyone who is either inert or hollow. These are entities who literally will do nothing until you show up, whether because they are undead, insane, or literally a statue. They have more in common with headless insects than people. These include the Iron Golem of Sen's Fortress, Gwyn, whose hollowed state is exactly why you have to kill him, the Last Giant, both the Belfry and Valiant Gargoyles, the Skeleton Lord, and King Vendrick. Mytha hangs out in a puddle of poison, clutching her decapitated head. If that isn't undead, I don't know what is. I'm pretty sure the Smelter Demon is just a decoration for the circular chamber he's fought in. The Curse-Rotted Greatwood sits in a corner until you start purging the unclean with Holy Flame. Placidusax is just hanging out somewhere in a wrinkle in time, abandoned by God. Midir got cooked by the Abyss, and eventually hollowed out. Bosses that are doing their job belong in the first of our top 3 categories. First up is our boy Pinwheel. He's just trying to raise a family. Next up is the Executioner's Chariot. He must be a street racer. That's the only way I can imagine being exclusively referred to by your vehicle. Flexile Sentry is described as being in charge of the transport of undead prisoners. Prowling Magus and the Congregation do cult stuff until you do a reenactment of that church scene from that movie. The Throne Watcher watches throne. Slumbering Dragon sleeps. Grave Robbers grave rob, very good. Deacons of the Deep deacon. I'm kidding. They're watching a big box. It's opened. It's empty. They're still here. And you find what crawled out of that box. One Aldrich, Devourer of the Gods. Devouring a god. Oh, hey, Gwendolyn. Osiris is keeping his head down, focusing on being a father. Champion Gundyr was a silly video game protagonist and overslept on the big day, only instead of a fun adventure, he's been abandoned in a world without sun. Udex Gundyr, on the other hand, is a sheath for the coiled sword, waiting for the Ashen One to start the game. The Godskins are spreading the word of the gloam-eyed queen, hallowed be her name. The Fire Giant was told by Queen Marika to go tend big fire. Malekith is doing a better job of watching over the Rune of Death this time, I think. Unless you won. And Horalu, warrior, is living out his Spartan occupation. Category top 2 is, they live there. These bosses just live in their boss rooms, and you're doing a home invasion. These include Priscilla and the Moonlight Butterfly, as well as the Bed of Chaos. I know that the Bed of Chaos is kind of rooted there in Promethean torment, but as the origin of chaos, an entirely valid form of life, I stand with the eggheads on this. After all, there are also the Demon Fire Sage and Centipede Demon, both entirely valid forms of life. Next up are the Royal Rat Authority and the Royal Rat Vanguard. It's a shame that King Rat acts the way he does, but monarchy happens, I guess. You walk in on the Rotten as he is trying to make friends. Covetous Demon was a man who simped in his goon cave over Mytha so hard that he became a giant slug. Remember to touch grass. Demon of Song just sits in its arena singing. Not because it's its job, but apparently that's how it's hungry for human flesh, and that's how it gets that. Dear Freya is a giant spider. Spiders are good for dealing with pests. Oh! It has 2 heads. Bring a torch. Lord of Cinder Lothric and his brother Lorien are fought in the prince's bedroom. His giant bed is literally right there. The Ancient Wyvern lives on Dragon Mountain. The Demon in Pain and Demon from Below are just a couple of guys being dudes. Makar started living in a cave after he did too many dragon hearts. Reichardt is a cold-blooded reptile and must be kept in a warm enclosure and fed a steady diet of powerful tarnish. Moog, Lord of Blood, started squatting in a remote section of the Shofra River after his prison break. Nito, lives in the catacombs. Calamite just decided that Ulasil was really nice this time of year and started making everybody's lives difficult. I don't know if Sullivan actually lives in his boss arena. I just assume he's just some sort of 24/7 grindset bro, seeing as how he uses his position of power to oppress others. The Lost Sinner is... I mean, if she likes punishment, is it really punishment? Would it be more punishing not to punish her? Actually, a bug crawls into her eye. I don't think you could be into that. The Regal Ancestor Spirit is a non-Euclidean life form stored in another plane of reality. Melania is sleeping off the whole nearly dying thing, waiting for her brother to come back. I think she's taken a lot of L's in a short amount of time and is just taking some time to heal. There's no shame in doing what you need to try and improve your mental health. She isn't in contact with her family for lots of good reasons, and she probably feels like she's a danger to everyone she is around for lots of good reasons. Even without her scarlet rot, she's renowned for her skill with the sword. So I mean, like, the one thing she is good at can't do anything to provide her any comfort because it's just as deadly as the rot. She sounds like she'd make a great Twitch streamer. Our last category is actively defending. While functionally identical to inert bosses or bosses doing their job, this is their life, and the only way you can move forward is by ending it. The Bell Gargoyles do sit inert, but it seems to be a drama thing. There are the Ruin Sentinels and the Guardian Dragon, who just kind of exist to stop you from doing whatever it is you're doing. Velstadt and the Dragon Rider still follow orders from Vendrick. The Throne Defender really do be. Fume Knight is Sasuke to Velstadt's Naruto. Ava, Lud, and Zalin are all guard animals. The Dragon Slayer armor is actually being controlled by the Pilgrim Butterflies, so that's neat. Nameless King, or allegedly redacted, as I like to call him, has a chip on his shoulder ever since his dad disowned him. The Soul of Cinder is a combination of all of the entities that have fueled the fire that serves as the engine of reality. It literally does nothing but protect the first flame. Half-Light is summoned to do Spear of the Church stuff to you if a random player character isn't tapped in. Frida is trying to protect the painting she lives in from fire, but manages to fail by the end of just Phase 1. I like to imagine that her and Father Ariandel are a kind of Pinky in the Brain situation. Anyway, the Red Wolf of Radagon proves to be a terrible debate partner. Both times you fight Loretta, she is defending a point. The Dragon King Soldier of Noxella is apparently protecting a Great Ghost Glovewort. I don't even think you have to fight it. I think you could just run past it. These failed experiments are big, but they're pretty pathetic. Commander Dale is holding on to half a medallion, and bringing the other half doesn't seem to matter to him. The leonine misbegotten at Castle Morn has succeeded in taking the castle and the castle's treasure. He's not going to let you take either of them away. There's a golden shade version of Godfrey, who I'm pretty sure is just another Morgoth illusion set to defend the queen's bedchamber. And Morgoth. He was originally put in the not actually in chamber category, but that little entryway into the Erd Tree is nothing. What is he even doing up there? Does he just stand there waiting for someone to come up so he can dramatically go down the stairs? And with that, I believe we have covered quite a bit of ground. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry? No, that is everybody. Oh, Radon. You want me to categorize Radon? Radon, who tried crawling back home after Millennia's bloom in Caelid? Radon, mad with the rot, who feasts upon friend and foe alike, howling at the sky? Radon, who, despite all that, still manages to hold the very stars in place with gravity magic? Radon, who meets the challenge of every festival because he desires death by combat? That General Radon? Thank you to all the really cool people who took the time to take really good in-game screenshots of some of these guys. I wanted to keep the thumbnails to in-game art for visual consistency. Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3 has some snazzy art for their trophies and achievements. For everything else, the wealth of images captured by in-game for photographers came in clutch. Trend upwards.